Welcome back to the Purple State of Mind podcast. My name's Ishan,
I'm Siddharth.
and today we're going to be talking about elections, all things elections, with the midterms just about 10 months away at this point. We really want to dive into what exactly we think is going to happen and what Democrats and what Republicans should be doing from now until then to gain a majority. Sid?
Yeah, before that, I kind of wanted to talk about, of course, the national media is focused on immigration, things like that.
As
And
they should be.
yes, across the country, you've seen a lot of peacefully organized protests, not just in Minnesota, but also in other places. In our area, there's a lot of school walkouts, a lot of coordination between high schools. And one of the key things that I think we should touch upon to start is how do we think youth and young voter turnout is going to impact this election? Because over the years, there's been a lot of differing opinions, but I want to hear kind of like what you think to start off.
Yeah, it in some ways it's tough to predict the way that youth is going to kind of divulge in this election. But I do know from my personal experience that a lot of people are very mad about the fact that what Trump has promised in his elections is not what we see today. We were promised that he would be going after the worst of the worst in terms of those who are here illegally. And instead, over 70% of the people that he has so far detained and that ICE has detained have no prior criminal record in this country. And especially when it comes to the Epstein files and all of these different types of things, Donald Trump has not exactly carried through with the promises that he's made American. And when it comes to affordability, a lot of people voted for him, especially our generation, voted for him because he promised the American people that affordability. And we haven't seen it reflected. Last year, we had one of the worst job growth in, I think, 10, 15 years, minus COVID. And it goes back to 2009. And the only reason for that is because of his immigration policy. So, in a lot of ways, the way I look at this is that he hasn't delivered on the things that the American people put him in place to deliver on. And so, if I had to give my personal opinion on how the youth is going to turn out in 2026, I think it's going to be very favorable for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that, however, really quick before I go, can you clarify a little bit what you meant by most of that is because of immigration when you
Yeah,
said, or is
so
immigration policy?
so what I mean by that is that a lot of companies have been fearful of hiring non-citizens to do the jobs because they don't either view them as a long-term option, considering the fact that the Trump administration has been deporting or detaining a lot of people, and a lot of it is because not wanting to ruffle any feathers with the current administration.
Okay, oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely understand that for sure when it comes to job growth. I'd say overall with affordability, I would really just blame it on poor fiscal policy. Or in general, there's been a lot of iffy things. I think one of the good things that I don't know if it was an indication or I think it was he said by executive order or something, banning corporations from buying single family homes. I think that's a big step forward. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Barring if Trump real estate doesn't go buy all these houses. But uh yeah, I guess economics, just poor fiscal policy, and even more affordability. I feel like for a lot of youth, of course that may not be their biggest issue because a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are still being provided for by their parents, so they don't actually end up seeing some of these affordability problems. However, I think the big thing for the youth when it comes to their involvement in the election is going to be optics. I mean, we're kind of in this new. This is a generation which cares a lot more about what they consider morally correct. Um, so, like for me, for example, maybe 5, 10 years ago, I aligned a lot more with Republicans when it came to immigration. However, in the current day, I guess a lot of young voters and a lot of young conservatives, especially, hopefully, the ones that are conservatives and not just they realize they're conservative, but not necessarily Republican. They realize that you know getting what we want shouldn't come at the expense of someone's civil liberties. It shouldn't come with the death of multiple American citizens. And I mean, it's the youth is, at least to a little bit of an extent, the situation they've become good at calling out logical fallacies when it comes to both sides. And I'm not talking about like both sidesism, but I mean I'm just saying peaceful protests compared to storming the Capitol. Those are two completely different things, and the response to the worst of which has been presidential pardons and you know these people being a lot of them being free out in the streets. However, it was a death sentence for peaceful protesters when it came to exclaiming themselves. And this is the loud generation. We are the loud protesting generation. So uh, yeah, the youth is going to play a big part. I do think it'll be favorable for the Democrats, and I mean, of course, we'll never know, but I think it's pretty safe to assume as of the first day of February 2026.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that, going back to the affordability thing. 96% of the tariffs have been paid by the American consumer or the American business. So that whole claim that other countries would be paying that, I think the American people are finally starting to realize that that is not true. And obviously, we knew that that wasn't going to be true. But a lot of people did believe it. And a lot of people believed it because Donald Trump had said it was true. And so, even if it's not just that fact alone, I think people understanding that he's not always telling them the truth when it comes to his policy is going to make people then vote for Democrats in the midterms. Plus, we've seen overperformance of Democrats since really Trump took over, but especially in 2025 in those special elections in Virginia, it was a pretty big win for Abigail Spanberger. For Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, it was a pretty big win for her. And I think that that's what we're going to see a lot in 2026. We're going to see Democrats overperform in places that they should win, as well as places that they shouldn't win. And yeah, I definitely want to add on to what you were saying about our generation being more vocal. I think a large part of that has also been the spread of social media and the fact that it's so much easier to organize now than it's ever been in the past. If you send out one Instagram post in your school, your community, anybody gets a hold of that, it can spiral really quick and it can become a mass protest. It can become a mass gathering. And we've seen that across the country, right? We've seen people and we've seen schools, we've seen all types of people walk out, strike, do whatever they can to show their support for the people of Minnesota. And in Minnesota, we've also seen that a lot of those protests have worked. Now, I never thought that I would be the type of person, or I never thought that I would be welcoming Tom Homan back to our streets to clean things up. But God, am I excited that he's back there. It's a really good thing for Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's not gonna. The youth aren't. I don't think the youth are really gonna care, because when you mess up so bad the first time and then you fix it a little bit, it won't help exactly what happened the first time. You know what I mean?
Well, my point isn't that that's not exactly my point. My point here is that a lot of the youth were involved in those protests and they accomplished something. And the people of Minnesota accomplished something. The people of America accomplished something. And I think that's worth celebrating.
Well, definitely. I mean, I feel like we have to remember that President Trump is a populist, and
Yeah.
I guess Kristi Noem got a little too unpopular for him. She's a lot more unpopular than he thinks, but in his eyes, definitely crossed the line, and he felt the need to do something. When it comes to these youth organized events, I mean, well, first thing is, I think it's been great. I've seen some really good things out in the Bay Area. I've seen a lot of different videos. I've seen different ways of people doing things, and again, I mean, I said this in previous videos. This is kind of a tough spot to be in as a conservative when it comes to the election, because you're stuck in a place where you have to pick between, do you want, because obviously I don't align with Democrats. Like that's never gonna be the thing. Where like I'm never gonna proudly vote for a Democrat, in a sense that if they align with the mainstream Democrat politics, if you know what I mean. However, um, I'm stuck in a place where either you vote for a Republican, but Congress currently and this administration is kind of going against traditional Republican ideals like small government, the right to bear arms, or just free trade, for example. Free trade is such a big thing. But then on the other side, you kind of, the pro that comes from Democrats winning would be that you can kind of freeze things because I don't think the Democrats will get the numbers to pass whatever they want, especially when the veto exists. I don't think they're going to get like a super majority. However, they are in a spot where they can probably deadlock a lot of questionable legislation. And there's not even a lot of legislation, in my opinion. A lot of these things come through executive order. And isn't it like a statistic? He's like the least effective congressional president ever.
Yeah,
Like,
and what that means is just that he's not going through Congress to get his agenda passed. He's doing it himself, despite the fact that they have a majority in both chambers. But
yeah, he
I
just
digress.
went around Congress, I believe, again through just presidential power to speed run more a weapon sale of like $6.6 billion to Israel,
Mhm.
and then $9 billion to Saudi Arabia. Um, kind of, I mean, the youth probably will observe this as well, at least when they get older, and if some of them decide to read into things, and then also just when you look at different groups of voters, when you go to the more economically inclined ones that care more about affordability, care about things like that, the Trump Besant idea when it came to tariffs was that they thought that they can strong arm certain nations into making favorable trade deals to fix whatever deficit or surplus there is. However, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, we haven't gotten full details, we haven't gotten paper signed agreement, but we've gotten verbal agreement from many different countries. India and the EU signed one of the biggest trade deals ever. Um, I believe like India and Chile just signed a big trade deal. The EU has been looking at a lot of different trade partners when it comes to rare minerals and just general goods that they get from the United States. So economically, I mean, it looks like a big fail, and then the numbers show that. The administration is currently trying to explain how the U.S. dollar losing value is actually good, and I'm yet to hear a logical explanation about that. And for the youth, that's going to matter because already, of course, you have social justice and you have all these social issues like immigration that's going on. But kind of when you reach the state, especially college students, when they have to worry about budgeting and paying their bills or like, paying for groceries, all that type of thing, they're going to pay a lot more attention to the way that, the reason things are priced the way they are. And our generation, especially at least the area that we're in, we come from, I feel like there's kind of a spike in interest in economics in this area. I don't know if you'll agree, but there's a lot of people that are interested in economics. Of course, like it can be to either go into investment banking, it can be to go into policy, it can be to go into diplomacy, whatever it is. But a lot of people here are observing. I know at school and other places, I get a lot of questions or a lot of, I have a lot of really good conversations when it comes to Trump trade policy and things. And like they say, this is the most politically active generation. Uh,
Yeah,
it's something it's good to see. It's great to see civic engagement in our generation. So
yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree, and I would extend past just the economics of it when it comes to other countries. They've kind of strong armed other countries into forming their own new world order. And that's dangerous in a lot of ways. I know Mark Carney talked about that a lot in his speech at Davos. And he basically said it. The US is no longer a reliable ally. And it extends a little bit beyond just Trump. And it's more so the principle that Trump has brought in that at any time, at any point, the US can elect somebody like Donald Trump, and the rest of the world is then at the mercy of them because and I think honestly for them it's a good wake up call. And Donald Trump has served as a good wake up call because when you are constantly reliant on another country, you're always at the whim of them kind of divesting from your country. And so when we see that, it hurts the US in a lot of ways, but it especially hurts our global standing. So when other countries then, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Canada and China have been in discussions about potentially opening up some deals.
oh yeah, everyone and
And
everyone apart from Russia has
yeah,
been in a lot of deals. Even Russia's been in deals with other, non-Western aligned nations, but still.
yeah, and that's very dangerous for the US, and that's a direct result of Donald Trump. And if going, and I know you mentioned Saudi Arabia and Donald Trump putting some money there. I really want Democrats in 2026 to run on a message of Donald Trump is one of the most corrupt presidents we have ever had. There was a recent analysis that Donald Trump and his family have collected over $4 billion so far in a year. In 1 year, think about what's going to happen in 4 years, right? And a big reason for that is because other countries are investing in the man, and in return, he'll invest in the country using the American taxpayer funded dollars. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, for instance, you see a bunch of Trump hotels popping up. You see golf courses. You see all these different types of things. When you look at Qatar, you see the exact same thing. They gave him a 400 million or 400 million whatever dollar plane, and all of a sudden, 400 million. Obviously, it wouldn't be 400 billion. They give him a $400 million plane, and all of a sudden, you see U.S. investment there. So, if Democrats run on a corruption message and say that this president is corrupt, I think it could ruffle a lot of feathers. And a big reason I say that is because in 2016, when Donald Trump was running, and I don't totally get on people for voting for him in 2016. I know a lot of people who did. I don't get on them because at the time he looked like an appealing candidate, somebody who was rich enough where he didn't have to take, you couldn't buy him. That was a common line. You can't buy Donald Trump because he already has all the money in the world. But what we have seen is that you can buy him, and they are buying him, and they continue to buy him.
Yeah, I mean, let's look through. Key thing I want to touch upon is you kind of mentioned the New World Order, and I know a lot of voters are noticing this because, of course, there's big disagreements from far left, far right, moderate, each side. However, I think the key thing that's been noticed by most people is that there is a lot of questionable decisions when it comes to taxpayer money in foreign nations. Um, Dating back to before President Trump. But let's look through, like you said, the New World Order.
Mhm.
Let's look at the Board of Peace, which is, kind of the example that they give when it comes to Trump trying to form his own version of the United Nations. Here are just some of the nations. I don't know everything about every nation on this list, but here are some of them that I do know about. Argentina, I do know that they've gotten multiple favorable loans from the Trump administration. They've joined the board.
At expense of
Hungary,
American beef producers, by the way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know some of the loans have been paid off, and I do commend the it's a more libertarian style administration in Argentina, which has done a very good job bringing their economy back from a horrible, horrible few years. I think a few decades. Then you have Hungary, for example, or Hungary. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, where their president praises Donald Trump in like every other speech when it comes to migrants. You have Pakistan, which I mean, I don't want to make it sound like there's a conflict of interest, but the Sharif family has bought billions or maybe millions to billions of dollars in Trump crypto and Trump coin, and they've made various real estate deals with the Trump family. Qatar gave the guy a whole plane. Uh, Saudi Arabia, we know how they get so much money in arms. The United States essentially subsidized. I know it started under Obama, but Trump's continuing it. They subsidized the Saudi Arabian bombing of carpet bombing almost of Yemen. You have Turkey, which the United States essentially gave a pass to. They abandoned the Kurds so that the Turks can go invade northern Syria. You have the UAE, um, which I mean they're kind of in a tumultuous situation with Saudi Arabia and Gulf geopolitics. But I believe the United States made, or they've been cooperating a lot with the United States and Israel when it came to the Abraham Accords and things like that. Then going on to the states that haven't showed an intent to accept their invitations to the Board of Peace. Cambodia is one of those nations that I believe is kind of backing Trump's claim that he helped form peace between them and Thailand or whatever. Egypt, I believe they rely a lot on IMF. I'm not sure if that's true anymore, but that's another United States kind of bullshit thing. You have Israel. I don't think I need to say much, but Yeah, you look through this list and you have a bunch of either really minor power, not even powers, just regional nations that don't have much geopolitical. Oh, and El Salvador is on this list. They've accepted their invite, and we know how El Salvador and Donald Trump, align. You have a lot of other nations. Jordan, I believe they're engaged with talks about the Abraham Accords. Kosovo, the United States backs them heavily when it comes to their struggle with Serbia. Um, you have a lot of nations that are either really tiny powers, they don't have much influence, or you have regional to kind of mid-major powers or mid powers, which pander to Donald Trump on many different occasions where they've benefited from his administration's policy. A lot of the nations that have declined Trump's invitation to participate, you have France, Germany, the United Kingdom, you know, three almost post World War II huge allies of the United States. Um, I believe from this list, apart from New Zealand, every single country here that's declined Trump's invitation is in NATO. Canada had their invitation rescinded. Um, and none of the nations that have joined are in NATO either way, apart from Turkey. So voters are definitely noticing that when it comes to foreign involvement because he campaigned on no foreign aid. Instead of foreign aid, we have like foreign purchases, foreign, I'm going to buy your support internationally.
Yeah, and I think the Board of Peace is one of the most interesting things I've seen. I read the entire charter, and it was stupid. It was really stupid. But one thing I did also see was that Russia wants to join, and they've shown an interest in joining, as well as Israel. But let's talk about Russia real quick. And Putin had indicated that he wants to use Russian frozen assets to pay for the $1 billion entry fee. And when Trump was asked, he was like, well, it's his money. Again, frozen assets because Putin invaded a country because he wanted that land to join the Board of Peace. I don't know how much more irony could be involved in this, but yeah. So we have that, plus we have Israel potentially joining. And the reason that Netanyahu was not at the signing was because he would have been arrested for, for being there. And there's so many interesting things to this, but I think the biggest one is that Donald Trump was appointed the chairman by himself. He appointed himself chairman. And there's no end term for the chairman. The US does not control it. It's not a US chairman. It's Donald Trump is the chairman. The US is just another participatory member. So in other words, Donald Trump tried to create his own NATO or his own UN with him as the permanent head of it, even after his presidency. And I think we also have to remember that this was formed and approved by the UN to serve as a peace finding way, a way for, let me rephrase that. It was formed by the UN to achieve peace in Gaza, not an entire world thing. And he's made it very clear that he wants this to be permanent by making other countries pay a $1 billion entry fee. Your thoughts?
There's not much more I can say. I mean, again,
Well,
I
well, let
feel
me
like
hold on. Let me ask you about specifically him being a lifetime appointment.
oh yeah, no, that's like a Chairman Mao position, like chairman for life. Come on. Um, I mean, I'm confused to see now what's going to happen after, he leaves office of the president because
The
chairman for life
U.S.
kind
won't
of
be
sounds like
on the piece
yeah,
of the Board of Peace anymore.
yeah, I'd be really confused. But more so, I mean, kind of one thing I'm starting to learn with my criticism of Zoran before the election. I think, I mean, I'm not really one to criticize entirely before we actually see something operate because again, we never know if they'll actually achieve something. I'm not very like I'm not going to say hopeful because I'm hopeful they succeed. However, I'm not very confident that they'll actually achieve a rightful is that the word righteous goal. Um but I mean, we'll see. I guess the main thing I was kind of getting at with that is that people are noticing because you can buy almost all of those nations for the right price. You can't buy Germany. You can't buy the United Kingdom. You can't buy France, or it's at least a lot harder to buy them compared to the other nations. Um, but yeah, I mean, kind of shifting from there, moving towards more domestic oriented things. Um, or the domestic reaction to Trump economic and foreign policy. One of the big things I want to talk about, or even national security, one of the big things I want to talk about, or at least just bring up, is I didn't know necessarily if this is a big thing. Tom Tillis is like one of the funniest guys I've seen. Uh,
Tillis.
Tillis, yeah. If you saw his thing on it was like the president called you an idiot or something, and
That
he's
was
like, that would make
funny.
me, yeah, that would make me qualified to be national security advisor. What did he say? Secretary of Homeland Security as well, or something? Like,
Yeah.
we live in
Also, honestly,
crazy time.
what is DNI doing right now? What the hell is Tulsi Gabbard doing, dude?
Yeah, wait, no. What is her job? I'm quite confused
She was
because
pictured for the first time, I think, in what, a couple months at the Fulton County voting booth raid by the FBI. By the way, the FBI is still on that.
yeah, that's quite sketchy. Um,
I mean, the
I don't know.
FBI is still on the
It's
2020 election,
it's
Donald
so
Trump's claims.
confusing. Yeah, it's so confusing. Tulsi Gabbard, because she was like, I mean, she left the Democrat Party, and I feel like she was quite popular, but then she probably just bent the knee because she wanted to hold a position of power.
She was never popular amongst the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, amongst the Democrats for sure, but I feel like a lot of moderates or in betweeners kind of
There's a
um
reason she was barely alive in that in
in the
2020.
campaign. Yeah.
She was awful. I mean, she spent so much time cozying up to Trump even then. And she spent 4 years, like the last 4 years of Obama's administration, just completely off the rails. She was never popular amongst Democrats. I don't know why. Like, it's not crazy that she switched over to the Republican Party. It seemed likely to happen.
Wait, I had a thought. Give me a second. Yeah, so I mean, that's like the key things. This is again going to be. We say this every election, but this is going to be another election which will be a lot different than what we've seen before, because it's just so questionable some of the things in this administration. Because what qualifications to be Secretary of Homeland Security does Christie Noam have? Pam Bondi for Attorney General and Kash Patel for FBI Director. Kash Patel wrote conspiracy books before he was the director of the FBI.
Well, I can tell you their qualification.
They're Trump, just Team
Exactly.
Trump, and
They're
that's
loyal to
about it.
Donald Trump. And I think that's actually very important to note because in his first term, Donald Trump was not the level headed one in his administration. All the other people were the ones who were level headed. What's dangerous is the fact that he's now the level headed person. Stephen Miller is still one of the lead architects of that administration. His mindset is really what it is that leads White House policy right now. And that's also why we've seen what we've seen in Minnesota, and also kind of why Trump has had to rein things back in. He hasn't been exactly happy with the media coverage because, as you mentioned earlier, he's a populist. And he knows that he's getting hammered in Minnesota, and it's not going to be good for Republicans in 2026 in the midterms. And even if you look at that Vanity interview with Susie Wiles, I think she understands a lot of this too. She understands that he needs to remain popular in 2026 in order for Republicans to keep either the House or the Senate or even both. And right now, granted, Democrats have a pretty bad Senate map in 2026, but in the House, Democrats have a real shot to take that over.
Yeah, didn't the margin shrunk already? They won a special election. Was
They
it today
did
or
today in
yesterday?
Texas, yeah.
Yeah, Harris County, which is
Yep.
I mean, it's
Christian
not like
Menifee won it. He's a
yeah,
good
man.
former lawyer, still a lawyer, and he's good. He's really good.
there is a lot of shrinking or a lot of retiring senators and you know um what do you call 'em? uh representatives who aren't going to be running for re-election later on this year. Again, Tom Tillis is one of the ones prominent ones that show up to me.
Yeah.
I hope Mitch McConnell isn't running again. Um was it Pelosi as well? She's not running for re-election, is she?
I mean, Pelosi's not running just because she's, you
She
know,
knows someone's going to take her spot. So
maybe not take her seat. I mean, I think she still would have won, but it's time for her to retire. She's had
no,
such a
that's what I
great
mean.
career.
It's like, yeah, she's probably confident because it's like the most safe blue.
Yeah. I mean, it's San
So
Francisco. You're not getting a Republican there.
it's the capital of progressivism. Like
Yeah.
progressivism? Yeah, progressivism.
Yeah. I think that really, based off of everything we've seen, Donald Trump's popularity has just gone way down. And it's because I think a lot of people bought into what he was saying. Even if you look at the Flagrant podcast, they were super Trumpy going into the election. And right now, if you look at their most recent episode as we're recording this, they're just bashing Trump over the Epstein files because it's a real concern amongst a lot of people. He ran on transparency, and what we're getting is the polar opposite of that. You know, the Deputy Attorney General, I believe, Todd Blanche, yesterday said that there is no client list. There is no Epstein client list. And I think the American people, and we know, and everybody should know, that that's a blatant lie. There's a clear cover up here. And the victims know that, which is why the victims have been very vocal about it. But really, the American people should be pissed off about this because you're being lied to once again. We're continuously being lied to, whether it's Alex Preddy or it's Epstein files. There's just this constant cycle of lying. And I think in 2026, we're going to see people's frustration with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of want to touch upon partisan politics really fast. I just want to say, um, again, you'll probably disagree with me here, but I mean, I hope people don't think that. I understand this is how elections work, obviously, but I just hope our generation. I feel like our generation has a tendency to pick one thing and then instantly run with it forever. Not necessarily change their mind, not necessarily look for possibilities in the other areas. So I hope for a lot of people that end up newer voters who end up voting Democrat. Um, I know in this case that the Democrats or the Republicans aren't very favorable in many sectors. However, uh, someone like Trump, I mean, probably not as unethical in a business sense. Someone like Trump can rise up from the Democrat Party at any time because his biggest fault is, in my opinion, politically is populism, just because populism in the modern sense has evolved to something that's um, meant to appease people based on one central thing. So, a few examples that come to mind. Obviously, you have Donald Trump. The thing that he was very populist about was immigration, in a
Yeah.
sense. And then somehow we've gone even further to where you have someone like Nick Fuentes, who's even more populist in immigration and Israel, which,
And white supremacy.
yeah, and white supremacy. Then you have on the other side, I mean, it's definitely more. I mean, I'm not going to say favorable because it's not like something I support. However, it's something that's a lot more honorable with like Zoran Mamdani, who was very populist when it came to socialist policies or technically affordability. And again, while Zoran isn't, again, I hope in previous videos I didn't portray him as this all evil that's going to turn us into. He's not going to
You
create
did.
New Yorkistan. I really, really, really disagree with him on his policy. I don't think that his agenda is necessarily achievable. Uh, Not everything in his agenda is achievable. However, he's done good with childcare.
He's done a great job so far. I've been
I don't think
pleasantly
his home
surprised.
what he's doing with homelessness. I don't really know. 13 people died. He still hasn't, kind of essentially forced them into shelters or forced them off the street.
Yeah.
Um, However, someone with it's something that my dad says to me all the time is that like people need to realize that someone like Trump, someone with that gets a crazy majority and is able to do things that are so drastic to enact their agenda, someone like that can rise up on the other side at any point. Like we don't know right now, obviously, but again, Donald Trump came out of nowhere. He was a joke. He was a joke until he ran for president in 2015. Or him running for president as a joke was a joke until what? Which caucus was it that he won? I don't know if it was Iowa or whatever it was. He won, and people realized he's suddenly the real deal.
Hmm.
And with again with our generation, and with overall with the voters, it's been the bane of politics for decades in this country. I guess post McCarthyism is people voting based on one issue, just based on one complete thing. If you're voting for president entirely because of immigration, you need to look at the bigger picture. It goes both ways, especially in my opinion, on the right wing, because if you're voting for a president entirely just because he thinks you should do an immigration moratorium or something, or like take James Fishback, I think that's his name, James Fishback in Florida, where people are insanely supporting him because, or at least young men are really supporting him because of like the OnlyFans tax or whatever, and just a general basis of how he wants Florida to be for Floridians, not Florida to be for Americans, is it's kind of counterintuitive in my mind. I mean, a lot of these people, again, I think I do that, maybe not we both, but I do this in some senses. A lot of these people speak a bunch of what's the word, pseudo intellectual nonsense, which it sounds all great, it sounds so good in your mind, but then when you actually put it out there, when you actually analyze it, you're like, these things don't mesh, first of all, and secondly, there's so many issues on this one part, and I blindly followed this person because of this singular part. It's very questionable because you shouldn't be voting. It's very worrisome because you need to find someone that's balanced. You need to find someone that's able. The back in the day, I say back in the day. I'm 18. 10 years ago, or maybe just before 2016, the criteria you look for in a president, if you were undecided, would be things like charisma, um, caring about the American people, decency. Like Mitt Romney lost an election. I mean, I'm not going to say he would have won, but it would have been a little bit closer. The one thing that messed him up was he said something about women. I forgot what it was. He made a joke about women that was kind of insensitive. Killed his vote with the woman. Um, you even had cases, President. Again, you bring this up, or the Democrat base brings this up all the time, and I've begun to do it as well. The Republican Party or conservatives nationally, like, got on President Obama for wearing a tan suit. And he had to give a national apology for saying that police acted stupidly in arresting a man outside of his old home. I know there's a lot more to the story than that. However, you have, the current president calls reporters piggy and, speaks in such an indecent
That's
manner. You know, we're kind of like, again, I reference my dad a lot because I talk to him a lot about politics, and he always says, he's like, none of us have seen, like, none of our generation have seen life before Trump, or we haven't seen politics before Trump. We were too young. We didn't see it, and one of the, obviously people will have their core issues or their core voting criteria, but in this case, or at least moving forward, hopefully in a post-Trump sense, when we move away from all this populist polarized nonsense, um, hopefully we finally have, we're back in the spot where we can vote based on a balance of things and charisma, statesmanship, diplomacy, their ability to negotiate, their ability to unite, their ability to stand, to correct themselves.
yeah,
I mean, obviously I wouldn't feel entirely better. I would feel at least a little bit better.
yeah, totally agree. And yeah, I want to backtrack a little bit to something that you mentioned about what your dad said about Trump being really the only political figure that we've known. And I had somebody tell me recently the exact same thing. And knowing that, and I don't think this is a secret, so I'm not going to be like hush about it, but knowing that I do want to eventually go into politics, they said, I want you to watch West Wing. It's recently on Netflix. If you have never seen it, go check it out. Watch West Wing and understand that that is what politics should be. The way that everything was a lot more civil in that time, and there wasn't just this obsessive need to defend your own interests, and it was a collective. There there might have been a Republican Party, there might have been a Democratic Party, but there was first the United States of America. Hell, that was a part of Obama's speech, his inaugural speech, just not that long ago. And we've moved so far away from that to the point where our generation really needs to understand what politics should look like. And I think that over the course of the next 4 years, and even beyond that, there needs to be sort of a de-Trumpism where the American people and I mean Donald Trump has been a political figure now for over 10 years. And we need to kind of move away from that brand of politics. And I'm not even going to say that it's purely on the Republican side anymore because Democrats have had to fight fire with fire in some lens to the point where I don't believe that their governance strategy has been great either. If you look at Gavin Newsom, for instance, his whole mocking thing on social media, it was fun for a little bit, where he mocks Donald Trump with that Gavin Newsom account on Twitter. It was fun for a little bit, maybe for a couple weeks, a month. It's weird now. It feels like you're playing reactionary politics, and I want a candidate. I want somebody to come out and truly be a unique figure. Not somebody who's divisive, somebody who's unifying, somebody who is able to bring the country together after Donald Trump has tried so hard to tear us apart. I want a candidate who's also going to be themselves and not try and be somebody else. Even if that's imitating that person, don't make that your entire personality because then you're tying yourself to that person. So I think that there should be a whole new wave of politics in the US, and it really stems with new leadership. It stems with new leadership, it stems with new ideas, and it also stems with what I think is the most important thing, not tying yourself and your policies to your party. Now, I know that can be a little difficult in the modern, the way that we have our primary system set up. But for me, for instance, I don't fully align with the Democratic Party on everything. So if I was campaigning right now, I wouldn't act like I do. There are a lot of things that I hold that are Republican, and I think James Tallarico has done a great job of this. Right? He's been so careful to make sure to not play that brand that I was talking about. Right? I think one of his main points has been I want to lead our immigration policy with a welcome sign at the door and a lock on it as well.
Absolutely. I just want to say I would
Mhm.
vote for him 150 million times before I vote for Jasmine Crockett one time in that Senate race.
Yeah, and I'm not. If you watch the
It's
debate,
it's
Jasmine
no
Crockett was pretty
disrespect to
good.
yeah, she was
It's
good,
just
but
the fact
James
that he is
Tallarico
so good.
and
He's so
I
good.
wanna touch upon what you're saying. I no way am I trying to necessarily romanticize the whole political scene before Trump because it's not like it was some great rosy thing. Um, Specifically, what because before, yeah, I feel like one of the things that kind of created this mess is that the previous system was not working. Like it just wasn't because there was a lot of I felt like it was more the more I read about it or when I see things and see examples, it felt more like bureaucratic politics in a sense, where there was within each party there was kind of these big bureaucrats who held more influence. So like you had the Clinton in the Democrats, you had the Clintons, Pelosi, Schumer, Obama. You had um, the high ranking ones, and the thing is, it was the same thing existed in the Republican Party for sure. Um, However, I used to say this a lot before we started this when we used to talk about politics. I said this a lot where President or Donald Trump, when he entered the party, the Republican Party eventually backed him because they thought they could control him because they're like, this guy knows nothing about politics. However, he flipped it the other way around because he had overwhelming popularity, or he at least he had a base that was united behind him. And like you said, kind of this post-Trumpism, de-Trumpism kind of thing. In a sense, we shouldn't go back to the way it used to be. We should kind of it's always been the bane of democracy, but we should try to have the most pure political system we have. There's so many things. The biggest thing for me is education, because the education system is nonsense. It's nonsense in the current state. Even teachers will tell you it's nonsense. There is no way that you can go into economics and say you have an interest in economics, um, and have not read this, and you haven't read The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. You can't. It's like being a Christian and have never read the Bible or books. I mean, it's kind of an over exaggerated sense, but there's books like this, the books of, you can't make, again, like I can't make a definitive statement about Karl Marx unless I've read unless I've actually read his work, which I've read a little bit of. Adam Smith, having read this, I can't say a lot about free trade and capitalism and the free market and things like that if I haven't read from this book, if I haven't read from kind of the father of this system. So education, like, do you ever remember that Charlie Kirk clip where he's talking to that kid from that college thing, and he's like, "What do you know about economics?" Blah blah blah, and Charlie Kirk is like, "You're studying economics, right?" And he's like, "Who is Milton Friedman?" You can't name Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman's one of the most influential economists of modern economics. Of course, you know Keynes, because if you don't know Keynes, you can't do economics. He didn't know F.A. Hayek. These people are so influential. And like, for politics, if you're a Republican and you want to understand the history of the Republican Party, you need to learn about him. You have to learn about him. I love having these pictures ready to just pull out. But you have to read about President Lincoln. He should be the one of the blueprints for policy. And instead, the role models we have, because it's not like it's just Trump. In both parties, you have these type of figures. I really like how you brought up Gavin Newsom, because I know you're a big, not I don't know if a big one anymore, but you're a supporter of Gavin Newsom, and I like how you
I am.
brought that up. How his Twitter account, how he's kind of uh it's reactionary, and even in the 2024 election, it was a big thing that I know a lot of not undecided voters that ended up voting for Trump said, is that Harris didn't really campaign on much apart from being against Trump, or at least in the debates. It felt like she was focusing more on him. And again, that may be incorrect where she did talk about policy. However, I think it's clear to both of us where the most outstanding things, or the things that really shined or were stood bright in her campaign, were things against Donald Trump. Like, remember that TikTok account had
Yeah.
like 10 million followers, 12 million followers. I understand there's probably a lot of
Kamala
14-year
HQ.
olds. Yeah, Kamala HQ. And I'll say again, I didn't support Kamala Harris, but that account was hilarious and it had so much engagement. However, almost all of it was just making fun of Donald Trump, or um, just edits of Kamala Harris walking, not talking. You know what I mean?
It's a bar.
And yeah, it's a it's 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 important that, again, we kind of move away from this reactionary thing, because uh this is completely unrelated to politics, but it's a saying I think we can apply to it, is they always go for the second person. The second person is always who gets in trouble. Like, in sports, in the NFL,
Great analogy.
the person that hits them first won't get in trouble. It'll be the one that hits back. That's the thing they're gonna see. In politics, it's the same thing. You shouldn't be fighting. You shouldn't necessarily be fighting fire with fire, because when you compromise ethics and your moral philosophy in order to win, then you're essentially losing the plot, or kind of losing your point. Because I'm not talking about compromising like political philosophy, because that's going to happen. You're going to have to find common ground. But even though ethics, again, ethics and morality to some extent is subjective, but in a general sense, I think we can establish as humans that there is an objective morality or an objective ethics. Like, for example, harming innocent people, harming kids, harming women, um, you know, theft, deception, things like that. Those aren't ethical things. Those aren't moral things. And while there should be that baseline, a lot of the time, when one side decides to take cheap shots, like Donald Trump did during the 2016 campaign and even 2020, the other side in 2016 they didn't respond. And I mean, they tried to respond. It didn't really work too well. But and I think that's more of a candidate issue. I don't really think that's because of their response. But in 2024, when they kind of tried to fight fire with fire, people were looking at the second group like, "What are you doing?" Because they got so used to the first group. They got so used to Donald Trump with his brash way of speaking, which I don't think is correct. I feel like we shouldn't be used to that at all. The way that he talks is disgusting. That's like, and then you have people that say it's locker room talk, or that it's just like it's the way you talk like that amongst the boys. He's the president of the United States, and he's speaking on live television. And the line should be drawn.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you were saying about education. And I think a large problem is that people no longer understand why they believe what they believe. And let's be very frank here, you and I are both guilty of this in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
as I think most people are. And a big reason for that is that a lot of people listen to things and then they simply just regurgitate it. They just say it again because it's what they heard. And what you then lack is that foundational knowledge. You don't understand you can't explain it as though you're a teacher of it. You're just explaining it the way it was taught to you or the way that you heard it last. And that's a big reason why our politics is so awful today. Because people don't understand the nuance and they don't understand a lot about what they're like they don't understand their actual thought process. And so the main thing that I would say is that there's a couple things that I want from a new candidate, and that's kind of aside from what I just said. Number one, education. You touched on that. Number two, real commitment to infrastructure, because I think it's one of the most underrated, under talked about things in all of American society right now. Because there is so much wrong with our country that stems from a lack of infrastructure. If you look at the entire, like, I'm going to give you an example of West Virginia. My uncle's from West Virginia. We talk about this a lot. And there's a huge problem with the fact that no politicians deliver for West Virginia in the entirety of rural America or the Appalachia, whatever you want to say about them. They're not really discussed in politics because they don't have many electoral votes. They're not that important in the grand scheme of things, which makes people not want to, which makes politicians not really caring, like they don't care that much about those states. And for instance, I'm going to put another example here. The coal mining industry basically carried West Virginia for so many years. And that was their entire economy. To the point where when under Obama, that economy started to go away as we moved closer and closer to renewable sources of energy, you saw a really large shift in the way that they voted because Democrats simply stopped going there. Bush went there, Trump went there, but Democrats stopped going to West Virginia because they simply didn't care anymore. Hillary Clinton used the word deplorable, and it immediately caught fire amongst a lot of people there because it was so easy to believe and so easy to understand why she would call them that because she didn't care. And that's a big problem that I have with mainstream Democrats is that they don't care about winning over the votes of people because they simply don't care about them anymore. So going back to the infrastructure thing, there are so many people in West Virginia who would vote for you in a heartbeat if you showed them that you can deliver for them. Because I don't believe that Republicans have delivered for them. Even though they continue to vote for them, at least the reason that they vote for them is because at least Republicans will talk to them. Right? So if they're willing to vote for you because you're going to talk to them, think about what they would do if you actually deliver for them. Bringing jobs back to West Virginia, making it so that graduating classes, 90% of those classes aren't leaving the state to find work somewhere else and that they can actually stay in their state. And that ties back to the education part. Making it so people can stay in their state because there's an actual functioning economy there is so important. There are so many ways that we can create jobs there, and there's so many ways we can create that infrastructure to make it so that rural America and Appalachia, all those areas have the resources that they need to succeed. If Democrats don't capitalize on that, that's their fault at this point. They're losing votes, they're losing support, they're losing the American people for a good reason.
I really agree. I mean, low key, Low key, I just said that. I can't believe that. Um, in school, I don't know if you hear this. I hear this a lot. I even say it. I mean, it's kind of in a joking sense, but it's kind of real. It's like, where does the funding go? Where does it all go? Because we pay, there's so much money in
Israel.
tax, so much taxpayer money. Yet, like for example, in our schools, I understand we're still privileged. It's crazy compared to other schools. We're still privileged for getting the $300 Chromebook that has like 2 gigs of memory. And you know, teachers, it's a philosophy. I kind of want to take the philosophy of I forgot how to say his name. He was the prime minister of Singapore that kind of turned things around over there when they got independence. Or no, foreign minister. Sorry, I think foreign minister. Maybe he became prime minister or something. It was that it's kind of his philosophy that to be the best, or if you want the best, you have to pay them like they're the best. If you want the best educators in the country, you need to pay them like they're the best educators in the country.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, yeah, there are teachers that have a love for teaching, but and just general people that have a love for teaching, but it's you can't live a luxurious life on $90,000 a year in California or
And
however much they get paid.
teachers aren't even asking for a luxurious life. They're asking for
They're asking
a
for a
livable
little more.
wage.
Yeah, they're asking for a livable payment because they spend so much time. And I again, infrastructure, like you said, I think that thing about like Chromebooks and whatever that kind of ties into infrastructure as well because where does all the money go? Like even there's some pretty not really that bad, but at least in other parts of the country, there's some pretty poor roads. There's some areas where they have to drive 35 miles to go to the nearest gas station
Yeah.
or things like that, and it should be a top priority because we talk about development and how the Western world is so developed and things like that. In what sense? In what sense is the Western world so developed? Because you have so much money over here, but where does it go? It doesn't go to infrastructure. I feel like infrastructure should be in the top three things of most spending
Mhm.
for every fiscal year because there's always something that can be improved upon. Like always.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting and worth noting that if you were to provide families in okay, so let me backtrack here. Across America, there are some things that are just simply not political, and things that should not be red versus blue. And one of those things is people's desire to spend more time with their family. So, building a highway so that people can spend 30 extra minutes with their kid before their kid goes to sleep. That's important. That would be important in a blue state. It would be important in a red state. But the problem is, as you said, where's the money going? Know that families can spend more time together, and that's the type of stuff that we want. And if you look at healthcare access in rural America is awful, right? And that's a really big problem too, considering the fact that we don't offer free healthcare in America, other countries do. We spend more per capita on healthcare than any other country in the world. Per capita, we're the biggest country in a lot of senses, and we spend more per capita than any other country in the world, and we still can't guarantee healthcare for every single person in this country. There's no argument for for not guaranteeing healthcare if we're spending more money than other countries. There's a problem there, and it's because we simply don't care, and we're caught up so much in our politics. But the problem is when we do that, we're showing people across the country that we don't care about them, and that's something that I would vote to change immediately if a candidate ran on that, which I hope they do, because there's so many lessons that you can take out of what's happening in our country right now. But I hope the main message that a politician takes from the current state of politics is that the American people want somebody who cares for them.
I feel like with healthcare, some of the solutions that we propose aren't necessarily going to happen just because The healthcare industry, in my opinion, runs the world. And the reason I say that is because um obviously human life, like humanity depends on life. Like I guess that sounds kind of stupid, but it's like, the most important thing for humanity is going to be health, human health in the long so for the health industry, they need to make money, and the way they make money is if people get sick. And it's a cruel, horrible, disgusting thing that they can profit off of that because there's so much research that goes into things like cancer, cures for cancer and cures for this and that, which they don't want to put out there because they're going to lose a ton of money based on that. With healthcare accessibility, for me, my thing is more than I. I'm not necessarily a believer in government subsidized healthcare for everyone. However, I think just for a lot of these rural Americans, the thing is, it isn't that they can't afford it. I mean, that's also a problem for some of them, but there's nothing nearby. Like they're gonna have to drive.
Yeah,
Like
that's
they're
my
gonna
point
have to,
about
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. They're
infrastructure.
gonna have to use half a tank of gas to go to the doctor.
Mhm.
So I definitely agree with you there. One of the greatest things in history was Eisenhower's Highway Act, one of the greatest policies in American history, and we need to see more of that. I don't know how infrastructure isn't talked about more. I really feel like that should be one of the biggest talking points of every election. However, it's not. And I think again, our generation, that's something that we should definitely pick up. I'm really happy you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it really just ties back into the main point that I have, which is that whoever runs for president in 2028 needs to be focused on investing in America. We've done so much to invest in Israel and all of these foreign stuff, and at this point, we've invested in Donald Trump's brand so much that I am hoping and praying that somebody in 2028 runs on investing in America, because bringing manufacturing back to our country is not going to be done by placing tariffs across the country, across the world, and then not building the infrastructure. It's going to be done by building that infrastructure here in America so that we can produce, building those assembly lines, building those chains of command, building everything here in America. Because without infrastructure, nothing happens. Right? And we kept trying to explain that to people during the election cycle back in 2024. You can place all the tariffs in the world and try and bring manufacturing back by raising prices globally. None of that's going to happen unless you build out the infrastructure that's necessary in America. If you don't have the means to create something, you're not going to create it, right? So I'm hoping that somebody just says invest in America, and invest in places like West Virginia. There are so many people who are willing to work, and there's so many good people there who are just tired of politics not actually governing for them. And I also want to tie this back a little bit to the rise in opioid use across America. We've seen so many people die from this. And I hate to compare it to this, but if there was some form of terrorist attack and it killed the number of people that drugs do, it would be the biggest story in the world, and we would never stop fighting until it was eradicated. Yet we really don't do anything to stop opioid
Yeah,
overdoses
yeah,
and
because these
drug
tariffs,
overdoses.
most of these tariffs, or at least the Canada and Mexico one, have been said that they're used to stem the flow of fentanyl use and things like that.
And they haven't.
But almost all of it comes from China. It comes from China, and it's the thing is, it's not that we need to focus more on that. It's just we don't. Why don't we put all the money that the American consumer is paying on these tariffs, or the tax the American consumer is paying on these tariffs, put that towards better equipment in customs? Because a lot of these things are not there. Because here's the thing: the precursors for creating fentanyl, a lot of them they don't have a smell, which is big. It's harder for them to detect. And I understand that. So then put more money, because you don't just sit down and give up. You need to put more money into it so that you can, catch this, because it's such a big issue. It's huge. It's huge. It's too
It
accessible.
is.
And
It is.
historical trends show that quality of life will improve with better infrastructure. Everything will improve with better infrastructure. You'll have first of all, better hygiene, which is important. You'll have less sickness. You'll have less drug usage. You'll have better transportation, more efficiency. You'll have a rejuvenated population that'll be happy to go outside and use the new road or use the smooth roads, use the high speed rail, uh, you know, to go wherever because they have the convenience. They can actually enjoy. They don't have to worry about the commute. They don't have to wake up at 5:30 to go to work 20 miles away.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up high speed rail. California voters have been promised high speed rail for how many years now?
Yeah, we haven't gotten it.
We
We
haven't
built
gotten
it
it,
in
and
a
we haven't.
we get they built it in the middle of nowhere. They built it in the middle of nowhere, whatever they have built so far.
Yeah, it's been disappointing to say the least. But I also think that just it also stems back to the fact that if you look into if you look into the records, this drug overdose and the opioid crisis, it really began because a lot of doctors were overprescribing painkillers, and it just led to this cycle of people getting latched onto these drugs. And so that's why I believe very strongly in the fact that if you really invest in these areas, you bring jobs back, you bring infrastructure, you bring a stable economy back to these areas, you're going to get people to live a higher quality of life. And just exactly what you said there. Because a lot of it is because you've thrown away their livelihood. Yes, it's going to happen. With new technology, you're going to have jobs that become obsolete. But it's what you do after that which is really going to dictate the course of said area. And if we were to there's so many available jobs that we could create through renewable energy, through data centers, through all of these different things. We could source that right here in America. We could source that in a
Also,
lot of these places.
construction, just building
Construction,
infrastructure.
building infrastructure, every type of every there are so many different types of jobs that we can bring right here to America, to especially the places that lost a bunch of jobs because of the coal mining industry that has become, as I said, obsolete now. There's so many things that we could do. So many things. But anyway, we are going a little over time here, so to wrap this up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to wrap it up, we touched mainly upon the youth and kind of things that we want to see. Um, the bottom line is both. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I guess for me, the bottom line is that it's not like one party is like great and gonna fix everything. I just hope that in these midterms, you get something or get whatever the result is, they're able to at least freeze this agenda in a sense where some of the more extreme radical things don't happen
Yeah.
because the next president, whoever it is going to have to fix a whole lot of stuff with it's different than how Trump is saying he had to fix the Biden economy or whatever. You're going to have to fix NATO. You're going to have to fix your relations in Asia. You're going to have to fix immigration because it's not even like we've gotten secure immigration. Like the border, yeah, sure, the border. You have 230,000 deportations. Barack Obama had 9.3 million deportations, and he did it without killing an American citizen. Just
Two
think about
American
that.
citizens, three American
Yeah,
citizens.
three.
But
Yeah.
I I agree with you on that, and it's gonna be a tough task, but we really need somebody who's willing to work with the American people and somebody who's not overly obsessed with themselves. And yeah, I guess it really ties back to what I've been saying this whole episode. Somebody who cares about the American people, cares about the entirety of the country, not just the people who voted for them.
Even the
And
6 electoral vote states.
6, 3, 2, 1, however, obviously not one, you have to have two. Anyway, yeah, however many electoral votes a state has, they're a part of America. Represent them. That's your job. Represent them. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you for listening.